So is India really about to become the next big startup hub, or is this just a bunch of hype?
The million-dollar question.
That's what we're going to find out. You ready to dive in?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay, first things first. The amount of funding pouring into India is insane. Credible reported something like a 2.7x increase compared to the week before.
Wow.
I know, right? We're talking somewhere between $270 to $375 million in just 1 week.
That's not just a rebound after a slow start to the year.
It feels like investors are finally saying, India, we're back.
Yeah, there's definitely a renewed sense of confidence. And remember, this was also the same week that PM Modi was on the international stage, at the Paris AI Summit, and those high-level meetings in the U.S.
Right.
It wasn't just a PR stunt. These were strategic moves to position India as a major player in the global tech world.
So we've got the world watching India, investors opening their wallets, and it looks like a lot of this money is going towards early-stage startups. Your story actually highlighted how early-stage deals were dominating that week.
Interesting. So is this a sign that there's just an incredibly strong group of young companies right now?
Or are investors just shifting their focus? What do you think?
It's probably a mix of both. I think we're seeing a whole new wave of entrepreneurs tackling some very specific problems, especially in fintech.
Fintech, huh?
Huge in India right now. INC 42 said that sector alone pulled in a massive $136.2 million.
Hold on. More than enterprise tech and e-commerce combined?
That's right.
So what is it about fintech in India? What's driving this obsession?
Well, it's definitely more than just bringing banking to everyone who doesn't have it.
Okay, so what else is going on?
Think about how huge digital payments have become, the rise of all these neobanking platforms, and the government really pushing for financial inclusion.
It sounds like a perfect storm for fintech innovation in India.
You could say that.
So fintech is the king of the week, but even within this frenzy, some companies really stood out.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
ToneTag, they got a whopping $78 million. SpotDraft, they raised $54 million. And then there's Zeta.
Ah, Zeta. Their $50 million round pushed their valuation to $2 billion. That's serious.
$2 billion. Whoa.
I know. And, usually a valuation that high means a company has reached a certain level of maturity. They've proven themselves in the market.
So this could mean that Indian startups are moving past potential. They're actually delivering real results.
It's a sign of things to come. We're seeing more and more Indian startups getting serious funding from global investors.
Right, and it's not just individual companies. We're talking about entire sectors gaining momentum.
Definitely.
And speaking of momentum, we saw some pretty interesting mergers and acquisitions that week.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we had Kinara, a semiconductor startup, getting acquired, and then the Kirana Projoper.app deal also caught my eye.
Why that one?
I don't know, it just felt significant. But what do you think is driving this consolidation? Is it a good thing?
I think it's a healthy sign.
Really?
Yeah. Acquisitions are a normal part of any growing ecosystem. It means companies are thinking about strategic growth, combining different technologies and expanding their reach.
Makes sense. So we've got companies being acquired, but then we've got others preparing to go public. Zetwork is apparently planning a $500 million IPO, and Urban Company is also getting ready to go public.
Wow. Could this be India's big IPO moment?
It really feels like it. And think about what a successful public listing would mean.
Yeah.
A ton of capital for the company, a higher profile on the global stage, which probably attracts even more investors and talent.
Totally. It's like a graduation ceremony for these startups. They've officially arrived on the global scene.
Exactly. But it wasn't all about the numbers this week. There were also some pretty interesting leadership changes.
Like what?
Well, Navi, for instance, brought in new CEOs for both Navi Technologies and Navi FinServe. And Sachin Bansal transitioned to the role of executive chairman.
Leadership changes, especially at the top, can tell you a lot about where a company is headed.
Right. What do you think those moves mean for Navi?
I think it might mean they're focusing on specialization, having dedicated CEOs to lead specific parts of the business.
Okay, that makes sense. And then there was this news that really caught my eye. Actor Pankaj Tripathi co-founded an audio platform called Velavit.
Really? That's cool.
I know, right? It's not every day you see a Bollywood star jumping into the startup world.
It shows you how diverse the startup world is becoming.
It's a good reminder that you don't have to fit a certain mold to be successful in this space.
Absolutely.
But we also saw some big departures that week. 2 managing partners left Peak XV, which used to be Sequoia India, and a top exec left Swiffy Labs.
Those kinds of exits are interesting.
What do you think they mean for those companies?
Well, they could mean changes in investment strategies, maybe some internal restructuring. Could even be cultural changes within the companies.
Like the other side of the coin, right?
Yeah,
Just as important to pay attention to as new appointments.
definitely.
So it's not just about the companies themselves, it's also about the people, the talent, the leadership. All that shapes the Indian startup scene. And speaking of location, there's one city that seems to be at the heart of it all.
Let me guess. Bengaluru.
Bingo. Credible reported that Bengaluru snagged 15 funding deals that week.
It's the undisputed hub of the Indian startup world.
But what makes Bengaluru so special? Is it just a matter of being in the right place at the right time?
That's a great question, and one we need to explore further. It's not just about location. We need to understand what makes Bengaluru tick, what makes it so attractive to talent and investment, and whether this concentration is sustainable in the long run.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
We have.
Massive funding rounds, mergers and acquisitions, talks of IPOs, leadership changes, and Bengaluru is still on top. But I'm curious, what does all this tell us about the big picture?
Yeah, is India really on its way to becoming a global tech superpower?
That's the big question, isn't it? And I think to answer it, we need to go beyond the headlines. Look at the underlying trends, the challenges, and the opportunities.
Right. What's really driving this growth and what could potentially hold it back?
That's exactly what we'll be doing in the next part of our deep dive, so stay tuned.
You know, Bengaluru is a fascinating case.
Oh, absolutely.
It's become this incredible hub for startups. Ideas are born there, companies grow, success stories are made.
Yeah, it's almost like its own little world.
Right. But is it becoming too concentrated?
That's a good point. Like, are we seeing a Silicon Valley effect happening in India?
Exactly.
Or are other cities ready to step up and become major players?
That's the key question, isn't it? Because if India really wants to be a global tech force, it can't just rely on Bengaluru, no matter how amazing it is.
So what's made Bengaluru so successful in the first place? And can other cities replicate that?
Well, it's a mix of things, right? Bengaluru has this long history of tech innovation. It was a hub for public sector tech companies for a while.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and that created a skilled workforce and a culture of, engineering excellence.
So it's not just a recent thing. Bengaluru's been building this foundation for decades.
Exactly. And then you have the IT services boom in the 90s and early 2000s,
Right.
which brought in even more talent and investment to the city.
It's like a snowball effect, right?
Yeah.
More companies, more investors, more ambitious entrepreneurs.
Precisely. Plus, Bengaluru has a pretty supportive government, great universities, and a relatively cosmopolitan culture, which is attractive to young professionals.
So it's like this perfect recipe for success that's been simmering for a while.
Yeah, pretty much.
But are there other cities in India that could follow that same recipe?
I think there are definitely some contenders out there.
Oh, yeah, like who?
Well, places like Mumbai, Delhi NCR, Hyderabad, Chennai, they're all becoming startup hubs in their own right.
Right.
They each have their strengths and are attracting investment in specific areas.
So like Mumbai, it's known for its financial services.
Huh.
No surprise that Fintech is doing well there.
Yeah, and Delhi NCR has a strong base in e-commerce and logistics.
And Hyderabad is becoming a big center for life sciences and biotech.
It's really interesting to see how each city is kind of developing its own identity.
Yeah, it's like different flavors of the same delicious dish.
Exactly.
But let's zoom back out to the national level for a sec. We've talked about all the excitement, the funding, the global aspirations. But what about the flip side? What could hold India back from becoming a tech superpower?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is infrastructure.
Ah, yeah, makes sense.
India has made a lot of progress, but there are still some gaps, especially in rural areas.
Like what?
Reliable internet, electricity, transportation. Those are still big hurdles for a lot of startups.
It's like having a Ferrari but driving it on a dirt road.
Exactly.
You can have all the potential in the world, but if the basic infrastructure isn't there, you can't really go anywhere.
And then there's the issue of talent. India has a huge pool of skilled engineers and entrepreneurs, but attracting and keeping the best people, especially in AI and data science, is getting harder.
Yeah, it's a global competition for talent now.
Oh, right.
Indian startups have to offer competitive salaries, great benefits, a good work culture. They've got to compete with Silicon Valley and all the other big tech hubs.
Absolutely.
And then there's the whole regulatory landscape.
Absolutely.
And then there's the whole regulatory landscape.
Oh, yeah, that can be tricky.
The government's been supportive of startups, but navigating all the rules and regulations can be a challenge, especially in areas like Fintech, where things are constantly changing.
It's a moving target. Startups have to be really adaptable to stay ahead of the curve.
And lastly, there's the question of funding. Sure, there's been a lot of VC investment flowing into India,
Right.
but can they keep that momentum going?
That's the question, isn't it?
It's not just about attracting investment, it's about creating an environment where startups can thrive and eventually stand on their own 2 feet.
A self-sustaining ecosystem
Exactly.
that supports innovation, encourages risk-taking, rewards success.
Which brings us back to those potential IPOs we talked about.
Zetwork, an urban company.
Yeah. Could those be the key to unlocking the next level of growth for Indian startups?
They could definitely be game changers. A successful IPO brings in a lot of capital, but it also has this ripple effect.
How so?
Well, it signals to the world that Indian startups are ready for the big leagues.
Like a coming out party.
Yeah, and that attracts more investors, inspires more entrepreneurs, creates this positive feedback loop of growth and innovation.
But even with these IPOs on the horizon, there are still risks, right?
Of course. There's always the chance of a global economic downturn,
Oh, right.
which could dry up funding and make things really difficult for startups. And then there's competition.
Yeah.
As the Indian startup scene grows, it's facing more competition, not just from other Indian companies, but from global giants, too.
So it's survival of the fittest.
Pretty much. Only the strongest and most innovative will make it on the global stage.
And there's also the risk of getting complacent.
Oh,
Right.
absolutely.
Like if India gets too comfortable with its success, it could lose its edge.
You can't stand still in this industry.
You got to keep pushing, keep innovating.
Exactly.
So it's a delicate balance.
Uh-huh.
Celebrate the wins, but stay hungry.
Yeah.
Keep pushing the boundaries.
It's about building on this momentum, tackling the challenges, creating an ecosystem that can grow sustainably for years to come.
Okay, so we've looked at the excitement, the challenges, the potential of the Indian startup world.
Yep.
But I'm still thinking about the human element here.
Mm-hmm.
What does all this mean for the average person in India?
That's what it all comes down to, right?
How is this tech revolution actually impacting their lives?
It's the most important question. At the end of the day, technology is only as good as its impact on people.
So we need to go beyond the numbers, the valuations, the IPOs.
Yeah.
We need to see how this innovation is actually making a difference in people's lives.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what we'll be exploring in the final part of our deep dive. We'll look at the social impact of this tech revolution, the opportunities it creates, the challenges that need to be addressed.
Sounds good to me. Stay tuned for the final part of our deep dive. We'll get into the human side of India's tech explosion.
Yeah.
All right, so welcome back to the deep dive. We've spent the last 2 parts really digging into the Indian startup scene, the funding, the battle for Bengaluru, the potential for these big IPOs.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride.
But let's shift gears a little bit now and talk about the people.
The human element.
Exactly. What does all this innovation actually mean for the everyday lives of people in India?
It's the most important question, right? Technology is great, but it's all about the impact it has on people's lives, their opportunities, how they live.
Couldn't agree more. So let's get specific. What are some of the ways this tech revolution is actually impacting the average person in India?
Well, one of the biggest areas is financial inclusion.
Oh, right. We touched on that a little bit before.
Yeah, all these fintech startups are making it so much easier for people to access financial services.
Okay.
Whether it's opening a bank account, getting a loan, making digital payments.
This is especially important in rural areas, right?
Absolutely. Places where traditional banks haven't really reached.
So technology is bridging that gap.
Exactly. It's empowering people who have been excluded from the financial system.
It's amazing. It's like tech-driven social change in action.
It really is. And another area where we're seeing a huge impact is healthcare.
Oh yeah, health tech is getting big.
There are all these startups developing really innovative solutions to some of India's biggest healthcare challenges.
Like what?
Well, things like telemedicine platforms, AI-powered diagnostic tools, making healthcare more accessible and affordable.
Which is critical in a country as vast and as populated as India.
Absolutely. And we're also seeing a rise in edtech platforms.
EdTech, so education.
Yep. They're changing the way people learn. Online courses, personalized learning experiences, making quality education accessible to more people.
No matter where they live or their background.
Exactly. It's pretty amazing to see.
It really is. And let's not forget about the impact on jobs.
Yeah, the startup ecosystem is a job creation machine.
Not just for engineers and tech people, though, right?
Nope, we're talking sales, marketing, operations, all sorts of roles.
So it's like this whole ecosystem that supports economic growth.
Exactly. And a lot of these startups are focused on very specific real-world problems in India.
Like what?
Improving agriculture, providing affordable housing, tackling pollution.
So there's a real sense of purpose behind a lot of these companies.
Yeah, they want to make a difference, solve problems, and they're connected to the needs of their communities.
I love that. It's inspiring.
It is. But of course, it's not all sunshine and roses.
Right.
There are challenges too.
Like what? What are some of the downsides?
Well, one of the biggest concerns is the digital divide.
Makes sense.
Even though internet access is growing in India, there's still a big gap between those who have access and those who don't.
Right. And that could actually make inequality worse.
It could. So it's not enough to just come up with cool solutions. They need to be accessible to everyone.
No matter where they live, their income, their digital skills.
Exactly. And then there's the concern about jobs being replaced by technology.
Automation and AI.
As those get more sophisticated, there's a chance that some jobs could disappear.
And that could lead to, unemployment, social unrest.
Exactly. So it's important to prepare people for this future, give them the skills they'll need.
And create systems to support those who might be left behind.
Exactly. And we also need to be careful about data privacy and security.
Ah, right, with all this data being collected.
Yeah. We need to make sure it's being used responsibly and ethically.
We need strong rules, clear guidelines, and a real commitment to protecting people's privacy.
And finally, we can't lose sight of the human element in all of this.
What do you mean?
It's easy to get caught up in the hype, the money, the race, to be the next big thing.
And forget why we're doing this in the first place.
Exactly. We have to remember that technology is a tool.
Right.
And it's up to us to use it in a way that benefits everyone.
It's about finding that balance, right?
Yeah.
Between innovation and social responsibility. Between progress and sustainability.
Making sure that this tech revolution really does make life better for everyone in India.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Indian startup scene, I'm feeling a mix of excitement and caution.
Yeah, me too.
We've seen the incredible potential of technology to transform lives, create opportunities, and tackle really tough challenges.
But we also have to be mindful of the risks.
And address them head on.
For sure.
The future of India's tech revolution is still being written. And it's up to all of us, entrepreneurs, policymakers, investors, citizens, to shape that future.
We all have a role to play.
It's a journey full of promise and uncertainty.
It is.
But one thing is for sure, India is at the forefront of a massive technological shift.
And that has the potential to change not just India, but the whole world.
And that's what makes this so fascinating, right? It's a story of innovation, ambition, and how human ingenuity can shape a better future.